Well, hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for being here tonight for Evolve Law Live. My name is Gabe Tenenbaum and I am the co-organizer of the Boston Legal Innovation Meetup Group. I'm also a faculty member of the law school, and I'm the director of the Institute on Law Practice, Technology, and Innovation, and our associated academic concentration. So thank you very much for being here tonight. And I want to introduce a couple of people who are going to be here with us tonight to really get things started. First is the law school's dean, Andy Perlman, who is the dean of the law school and a professor of law here. He's a nationally recognized voice on legal education and law practice. He serves as the chief reporter of the ABA's Commission on Ethics 2020 and played a key role in drafting the ABA's amendments on professional conduct as related to technology. He was recently appointed to serve as the vice chair of the ABA Commission on the Future of Legal Services. He is the founding director of the Institute on Law Practice, Technology, and Innovation, as well as the Legal Tech and Innovation Concentration. In 2015, Andy was named one of the 50 entrepreneurs, innovators, and trailblazers who have charted a new course for the delivery of legal services. So please welcome Andy Perlman.
Thank you, Gabe. So in my role as dean, I have the opportunity to welcome many groups and individuals to our building, but rarely do I get one that's so squarely in my wheelhouse as this group. It's like being a kid in a candy store to be at a legal tech event. So welcome to all of you. As Gabe mentioned, I was the inaugural director of our Institute on Law Practice, Technology, and Innovation, as well as the related concentration in that area. And so this is a real treat for me. I'm going to start off by getting something out of the way. At any event like this, somebody has to quote Richard Susskind. So I'll get that ball going and quote him, although I'm not really quoting him, I'm quoting him quoting Wayne Gretzky. So Susskind likes to quote Gretzky as saying, it's important to skate to where the puck is going and not where it is right now. And Richard makes the point that in the context of the legal profession and the legal industry, it's important for lawyers to skate to where the legal puck is going and not where it is right now. The problem, I think, in many law schools is that law schools fail to train tomorrow's lawyers where the legal puck is going. In fact, most law schools, in my view, don't do a particularly good job of training students where the puck is right now. They train students where the puck was 50 or 100 years ago by looking at past practices, at precedents, and they really don't teach students how to use technology and other innovative practices to deliver legal services in today's legal marketplace. So as the dean, I should have to do something about that, and I think we are. So Gabe mentioned that we have an Institute on Law Practice Technology, and we have a concentration in that area where we are teaching our students about legal document automation, about expert systems, about legal project management and process improvement. And in fact, one of our graduates, Gerald Glover, raise your hand, was in our first graduating class from that concentration and is working at a legal tech company here in Boston. It seems to me these are the kinds of jobs we need to be training our graduates to have. There's growth in that area, so rather than training our students to take the jobs that existed decades ago, we need to train them on where the job market is going. In addition to our concentration, we have an accelerator to practice, where we're teaching our students how to create their own financially sustainable practice while in law school by leveraging technology and using fee-shifting statutes and other innovative practices in order to deliver legal services to average income individuals. We've partnered with a former in-house counsel on a legal technology audit that's being used throughout the legal industry, and we're creating many of our own apps. Gabe Tenenbaum has his own app, which I hope he'll tell you something about. So the bottom line is, I know you don't want to hear any more from me, so let me wrap up by just saying, in my view, law schools have an obligation to prepare students for the 21st century legal marketplace. In order to do that, we need to understand where the legal marketplace is. An event like this one is exactly what law schools need to be doing, and so it is a great pleasure to welcome Evolve Law and its first ever formal event here at Suffolk Law School. So very much a warm welcome to you. So without further ado, let me turn the remarks over to Jules Miller, who is the co-founder of Evolve Law, and once again, thank you for being here and welcome.
All right, welcome everyone. I'll be very brief, but for those of you who don't know about Evolve Law, we launched last week. And I think the thing that makes us different is that we're all legal tech entrepreneurs and practitioners. We are doing full-time jobs in the legal tech space, but we are all really passionate, and we've got more than 30 people involved right now, companies involved right now, all really passionate about a couple of things, about making the legal industry more innovative and increasing the adoption of technology and new thought and new processes in the legal industry. And we are doing that through things like this, our inaugural event, and we're really excited to have you here today. So thank you for that. I want to thank a couple of people. So thank you so much to Suffolk Law, and especially Mike Capucci and Gabe Tenenbaum for helping us host this event. Thank you to our wonderful founding sponsors of Clio, Avo, Good to Be Social, and Davis Wright Tremaine, which is the first law firm to come on board and see the trend in legal tech and really be a part of it. So without further ado, we'd like to get the panel kicked off. So thank you very much. And please tweet. All of the hashtags and Twitter handles are here, so please take the opportunity to look at your phone and tweet.
Hi, I'm Mary Jetton, and Jules and I came up with this idea over lunch, which was the very first time we ever met. We share a common passion for just getting things done. So we went ahead and we've had 5 of these events, which we now term our experiments, and this is our first formal we actually have a real live evolvelawnow.com website, and we invite you to go look at it. We are videoing this, and we'll put it up. That's part of what we want to do. So thank you to all of the people in the room who braved the rain and the transit delays. So we are going to get started with a panel tonight that's on investment in the legal tech industry. So I'm going to introduce our panelists in the effort to be brief. They're very short intros. So from the end, Dan Lear. He is a self-described lawyer and legal industry gadfly. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. He writes and speaks on a variety of legal tech matters. He's in many publications. He speaks a lot in his role as I'll get this right, industry relations for Avo. And our second panelist is Barbara Clark. And Barbara, she kicks ass and takes names. That's her official description. But she is an angel investor with Astia Angels, and she is on the investment committee of Rising Tides Fund here in Boston. She has investments in 18 companies in several legal tech verticals, and full disclosure, she's on Tracklight's advisory board, which is my day job, the same way that Hire and Esquire is Jules' day job, and she's also a Tracklight investor. And then we have Juan Leung. I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your name.
You got it.
Leung Lee.
Yeah, that's better than mine.
So we have Juan, who I just met, and he's based in Boston with General Catalyst. He's been there for a couple of months, and General Catalyst, if you don't know, is a national venture firm. So they take exceptional entrepreneurs and back these innovative ideas. And we're really excited to hear the perspective from Barbara, who's a super angel, and Juan, who's in a VC firm, and then Dan can share his experience as Avo has raised the most money from banks of any legal tech startup. So for those of us who are smaller, kind of baby toddler startups, then we have the big LegalZoom, Clio, Avos who have raised in the tens of millions, and I'll let Dan say the exact number if he's allowed of how much they've raised. So we're gonna start off with a little bit of background. For the 2 investors, what legal tech deals have you done or looked at?
Well, I did the Tracklight deal. And I would say I have looked at a lot. I'm a generalist investor, so I look at a lot of different industries, and I see a lot of similarities between legal tech and, say, ed tech. It's the most similar to me. So having said that, so I do look at a lot of companies sort of nationwide.
Juan?
Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and Jules and Mary for organizing. I find Barbara's analogy fairly interesting because I have a good background in ed tech. I never thought about it that way, but that's fairly true in terms of the analogies that you could make. I personally have not made any investments in legal tech. My firm, General Catalyst, has invested in a company called Visa now, which is based in Chicago, and helps thousands of people process visas, work visas, which is a big problem, which is a fairly fragmented problem. And then personally, at my previous firm, I was with Javelin Ventures out in the West Coast. We looked at the discovery law space quite a bit. But I think, just like with any startup, sort of the difficulties and challenges that you face are very much transferable beyond just legal tech, for instance.
Okay, thanks. And so Dan, here's the moment. So how much money has Avo raised, and from whom did you raise the money?
So, I gotta you'd think I'd know this off the top of my head.
Should we all look at Crunchbase?
Yeah, I was gonna pull up Crunchbase myself. So the total number I believe is around $132 million. A Series E that we closed in July was by far the largest investment of just over 70. And it has come, and I'm not gonna get the early stage investors. Kind of starting with the most recent and moving back, Technology Crossover Ventures, Coatue, there's one from Seattle whose name, Ignition Partners, and then Bill Gurley's firm.
Benchmark.
Thank you, Benchmark. And then going back, it's gonna get hazier and hazier, but Coatue was in the D round and the E round. Ignition has been, I believe, since potentially as early as B, and I don't know that they've invested more recently. TCV was just the most recent investment, so it's kind of run the gamut. But those are by far the main and certainly the most recent and large scale investors.
And not to put you on the spot, but
Put me on the spot, Mary.
did you start where most of us start, with kind of friends and family? Do you know? I know you've been with Avo just over a year.
So some of this is going to be my commentary on what I've seen. It's interesting. So Avo launched 2 months before I took the bar exam. And they were based in Seattle, which is where I've lived and where I practiced before I took the job with Avo. So I've kind of watched them grow up. And I guess the piece of this I was going to say is, while I have maybe more of a perspective than some, to some extent I'm speaking from what I've seen from the outside and not necessarily from the inside. Our CEO was the general counsel at Expedia and actually helped take them public when they were spun out from Microsoft. So he happened to know the CEO of Expedia, a guy by the name of Rich Barton, who's maybe a super angel, maybe just a very well-known investor and kind of tech guy in the Seattle scene. And this will, I think, get to one of the questions I think you're going to ask later, which is sort of how do you go about getting started? And I won't spoil. It helps to know people like Rich Barton, which is really bad advice for scrappy young entrepreneurs, but it's as I've talked with our CEO, and I do spend a fair amount of time with him because we travel a lot together, and I've gotten a lot of time with him. The fact that this was not his first time at the rodeo, right? A gentleman whose name I'm also going to forget, who joined our board from TCV in our last funding round, was someone who was also on Expedia's board. So these relationships have been long and I think very valuable. The one thing I will say that I've watched about what Avo did, and I think is an interesting statement both about sort of startup life and about legal tech in particular. So Avo was founded in 2007. And actually, I've seen some of the early pitch decks, like Mark had this idea, our CEO had this idea back in 2005, 2006. So 8 years is a long time for a tech company to mature. And I think one thing that they focused on, and this is also probably sector specific, and now I'm saying way more than our other two panelists, so I apologize for like monopolizing the
cut you off.
time.
Okay, 'cause
But
there actually is data out about like how long it's taking companies to mature, and you're right, 8 years is long.
Yeah.
And it's shortening slightly. It's taking some of the companies that are the unicorns, it's taken them about 5 and change years
Yeah.
to get there, so yeah.
the other, and so I think that's an interesting statement either about
And
what
also
we're seeing happen.
2008, like if you were in business
Right,
before
it's like-
2008 and you survived,
Totally.
Yeah, you sort of don't count those
Yeah.
couple of years.
yeah.
So I guess to finish quickly what I was going to, and I think you're exactly right. There is an open question as to, I would say, is the legal tech market maturing? Is the tech market maturing or changing in a way that we don't see? Or I can't remember what the third thing I was going to say, but the other piece is I think what we did, and again, this may be really specific to our sector, we focus heavily on the consumer, is we focused for a really long time on getting the fundamentals right. And really doing that with a relatively small team. So when I was hired, I was the 75th corporate side employee and about the 150th total, because about half of our employees are sales. So they ran very leanly for a very long time, getting a few really key pieces in place that would then allow for the thing to scale really quickly. And so as I look from the outside, there were a few small rounds early on that kind of kept
lights
fuel.
on.
Yeah, exactly. And then, and I think we were really smart in the sense that we didn't try to raise a huge amount of money before those key pieces were in place. Very
Okay.
lengthy answer, sorry.
That's okay, Dan. You'll be penalized later. So as an investor, back to our investors, you talked about this a little bit, but how do you view the legal tech space in comparison to, now you mentioned ed tech, what about fintech? Because with our company, we run a little bit into the fintech side of things too.
Well, and actually just, what's interesting too, because you are consumer facing, so I think sometimes even, the issue is also, are you B2B or are you B2C? Because if you're B2C, then the capital need you have is gonna be so much greater than most B2Bs, at least to get to a critical point. So fintech is actually really interesting, because like law, there are people who've been doing it a certain way for forever. And can be tricky, but at the same time, you have the same pain point, like a similar feeling of pain point where certain people will get it. So people within fintech and legal tech, they'll say, oh, this is a huge pain point. I wish this problem would go away, but it's a problem that the rest of the world doesn't see. And so I was having this conversation earlier about this is why you see so many startups solving the problem of food delivery. Is that really a problem? No. Like, we can get food delivered. It's like, why is there yet another company that's an app on my phone? I can get food delivered to my house. Of course you can. Whereas a lot of business problems, which actually have real dollars attached to it, they can appear very sort of unsexy, and the pain point is only understood by a certain cohort of people. Even if the dollars associated with this are really huge, it doesn't have that broad visibility. So so they're definitely, like I said, ed tech I think is similar, fintech is similar, and legal tech. So yeah.
I guess to piggyback off what Barbara's point is that just to take it to a higher abstract level, building any startup is extremely difficult. But I think in the legal space, in ed tech and fintech, there are, to Barbara's point, intricacies and people set in their old ways. So what I think the word that comes to mind is balance. As an entrepreneur, you kind of want to have some knowledge and some domain expertise of how the process works, who to talk to, how to get people to buy into your product. At the same time, as the entrepreneur, you also want to be the dreamer, coming up with a solution that no one has ever thought about. And so I feel like balancing that vision for this is how the world should work, this is a problem that's massive and I have a way of fixing it, and at the same time balancing that with understanding, having empathy for it's an old industry, they're set in their own ways, and therefore the way I'm going to attack it, given the above, is X, Y, and Z. So having that view of this is where the world will be, having that vision of 5 to 10 years, and balancing it with a strategic point of view of this is how I'm going to get there, this is how I'm going to scale. I think with Apple's story, it's really refreshing in that initially, as a company, you're first building product, you want to find that problem, you're iterating, you're testing it out, you're making sure the unit economics work, and there is no point in raising larger amounts of capital unless you're ready to scale, which that's a really refreshing story to hear. So.
And if I'll quickly editorialize. One thing I have noticed, and again, this is me commenting from what I've seen, and I think it's just an interesting data point. It's not a criticism of one way or the other. Again, our CEO is in his late 40s, right? Not the stereotypical startup 20-year-old founder.
I would say, because that's all a myth. The vast majority of successful startup founders are actually over 30, and they have industry experience and all that. So this myth of like this wicked smart, from Boston, wicked smart, like 20-something-year-old guy, it's a total myth. So yeah.
The Mark
so you're-
Zuckerbergs
you're-
of the world are
Totally
few
an
and far
aberration,
between.
whereas
Totally.
an experienced person.
And as we've built out our management team, I've seen our CEO and the management team, the senior leadership, bring in experienced people, right? People who know. I mean, they're not always super experienced, right? We have Microsoft in Seattle, which is not always the best place. Sometimes it is, but not always the best place to recruit tech people who are good at scaling a business quickly and making it big. It's just a different mindset, and I say that with all due respect to folks at Microsoft. But we've I think been very selective and very smart about picking more experienced folks who are about that age, right? Who have worked in reputable companies, but aren't like, it's not somebody we found at the local Seattle tech meetup who was like super passionate or just wanted to get into a startup or something like that.
Well, I would say, like, it's always a great tip in a startup to hire somebody you think is smarter than you. There's a great, it's old now, it's probably like 10 years old, the book about eBay, The Perfect Store. And they go through a lot of that, like, what they were thinking of, like, when they made their first couple of hires. They were hiring people that were so way out of their league, and they were faking it to make themselves seem like they were much better than they were to attract these people. So you definitely want to do that. You never want to be the smartest person in the room.
So just to piggyback off that, how important as investors is it that there's a legal professional on a legal tech team, either a practicing attorney, former practicing attorney, or something like that?
With startups, I am personally generally a believer in non-absolutes. So it's hard to generalize and say you should definitely have an industry expert or you should definitely not have an industry expert. I think it depends. It depends on how that person is, whether if they have an industry expertise, are they going to be saddled by thinking in old school ways, or are they going to take advantage of their knowledge? So I personally don't think that it matters. What matters is being a great entrepreneur, building a team that complements you, and is really passionate for the problem that you're building together, or rather the problem that you're solving together. And so you can build that domain expertise. If you don't have it, you can surround yourself with advisors who know the industry, who can connect you to people who understand what the problem is. Or if you have the knowledge, use it as an advantage as opposed to a way to weigh you down.
Yeah, I totally agree that there is a nice balance between somebody that knows the lay of the land, but then you're not burdened by that.
Exactly.
Uber didn't come from the taxi industry for a good reason. So, yeah, so like having that fresh perspective, but then also having advisors that can tell you, like, these are the pain points, these are the, this is the lay of the land, yeah.
Can I chime in on this one too, Mary? And
I
this
don't
is,
know, maybe.
I haven't at all before. Because I just want to comment on this because I feel like I'm a pretty unique case in the sense that I was a practicing lawyer who then went to work for one of these legal tech. We're not really a startup, but I'm getting more of a taste of it. And I expected them to like welcome me with open arms and be like, oh, you have so much information and you know lawyers and blah, blah, blah. If anything, they want me to get out of the way. And it's so, and I think there's kind of, I think that lawyers, first of all, I think a fallacy of lawyers, if I can get on my soapbox, and I speak from personal opinion, or one of the challenges that lawyers have is that they frequently think they're the smartest person in the room. And they think, and again, I don't know if Andy's still here, Susskind says this all the time, lawyers think they can wipe out other disciplines in a weekend. And so I think that if you really are serious about trying to get into this space and to like do a tech startup or even a legal tech startup, you've got to take a different approach because you're not going to understand what they're doing overnight. It's really complicated stuff and it's really sophisticated. The other thing I think I would say, I think on the one hand, I think domain knowledge is crucial, right? Of some variety, or at least understanding, and whether you get that from your advisors or otherwise.
Having that willingness to figure out what it is that I need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and pick and choose.
Right, but I'll flip back and say it was so interesting to me when I started working at Avo, because all of a sudden there were these people who didn't come from a legal background, who were like so interested in these legal things that I was interested in just because I'm a legal industry nerd. And my point in that is, to a large degree, legal is like travel, is like finance, is like, the question is, do you know how to listen to your users? Do you know how to then build products that are responsive to them? Do you know how to do all of these things that actually, and yeah, domain knowledge helps, but actually it looks very similar. I mean, we frequently share information with other similarly positioned startups kind of in our broader Rich Barton family, like Zillow. If you guys know Zillow, they're a real estate marketplace. They're based in Seattle. We compare notes with them all the time. Expedia, similarly, again, in fact, frequently what we say is like, we're just doing to legal what Expedia did to travel. There's another couple interesting, Glassdoor or RealSelf. They're smaller, also Seattle-based marketplaces. And those are all in varying industries. But the domain, the expertise of just simply knowing how to build products and how to build businesses, that's transferable. So I think the domain knowledge is important, but I think lawyers tend to overstate it and overestimate it.
And the example that I often use is that Clio wasn't started, Jack's not a lawyer, I don't believe Ryan's a lawyer either, and sometimes I think it's good to come in with a little bit of knowledge, and as you were mentioning, as Juan was mentioning, you're disrupting the whole space. But I have this other theory, which is that if you do have, and I'm looking back at Ned from eBrevia, if you do have that connection to the law firms, it makes a perfect place to do your customer discovery. So that leads into my question of, and I know I'm all over the map here, but you guys are ad-libbing, so I'm gonna ad-lib too. So how important is traction as investors? Traction, and what do you think that, this is like the, the big elephant in the room. What is the size of the legal market? What do investors perceive?
I hate the word traction.
Sorry.
No, because it becomes anything you want it to be, because every startup says they have traction, but if what they're measuring as traction is not what I think is valuable, then it's not traction. So I think you need to know what's important. So what are the, depending on the kind of company you are you a SaaS solution, or what are you, like, what is your play, and what are the measurements that are important in that area? So so you can say you have traction, but I would really want, they have to prove it to me. What was the second part of your question?
The size of the market.
The size of the market, I mean, I think that, it really depends. And I think that the successful entrepreneurs are able to really take something that is, flesh it out for the particular segment you're going after at the moment, and then to sort of extrapolate, or at least paint a picture of how it becomes something bigger. Because you're right, if the market's not big enough, it will limit the kind of investment that you get. You might be able to get just an angel investment because maybe it's the market opportunity isn't very big. But if it does have larger market opportunity and you're going to get institutional investors, you need to be able to sort of toggle between that. Like, we're in this segment now, but look at all this other stuff that we could be doing, and this is how we're going to get there.
Just to add to that, the word that comes to mind is momentum. So I think about it as more momentum. And again, it depends on the stage of the company. If you're a seed stage company or you're raising angel financing, chances are sort of the traction / momentum that you have is very different from a company like Avo. So I think about it as momentum. As you guys know, making oftentimes at such early stage, making investment decisions, it's a mix of being science and an art. And so trying to figure out, is finding alignment between the investor and the entrepreneur, is this vision big enough? Are they solving a large enough pain point? And then when it comes to the metrics themselves, they're important, and it's important for the entrepreneur to understand what are the important metrics, but it depends on the type of product. If it's a consumer product, if we're talking about 10,000 users over 2 years versus 10,000 users in 1 day, that's very different. So it's less about an absolute, it's about a relative measure of market size, product, pain point, CAC, LTV. So it's less about an absolute number, but it's about how all those pieces fit together. And so in terms of the market size, I think as an entrepreneur, and at GC, we're all former entrepreneurs and partnering with entrepreneurs. And I think as an entrepreneur, it's very important to be, like I said earlier, the dreamer and the believer, but it's also important to understand sort of the type of company you want to build and that you are actually building. There are great businesses that could, pump out cash. And so if you overcapitalize, you restrict yourself from certain opportunities. So it's about, if you're raising venture money, you ideally should be addressing a multi-billion-dollar addressable market, bottoms up. So it's important to understand the type of company you're building. And so a measure for success for startups is not the amount of funding that you're raising, but it's about the product that you're building and the pain point you're solving. So I would focus less on, what can I promise to raise as much money as I can, and more on like building a great company.
Mary, I'll just quickly, and interestingly, I think that discussion can evolve too. I know that when Avo started, one of the big markets we were looking at was the market for Yellow Pages, which for lawyers was a huge advertising market. And now we can look back and say like, oh my gosh, like, of course that market was gonna die. But in 2007, 2008, that really wasn't a foregone conclusion. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, our CEO says that market was something, it was in the multiple billions when he sort of started Avo. So, good sized market, interesting opportunity. To answer your question, which is one of the questions you were saying before, we've now grown and we've taken a good chunk of that market and changed the way that business model works. Now we're turning to look at the market for legal services all up. And I think because we've proven our success in the Yellow Pages market, our investors are a little more comfortable with the fact that, and there are lots of people in this room who can talk about this. I don't know if you guys have done the research, but the size of the legal market is really hard to measure, and no one's done it very effectively. The number that people throw around is 300 billion, with about 110 to 150 of that attributable to small businesses and consumer law issues. Again, we've done a fair bit of research on this, and I've even had my VP come back to me and be like, here's the number, and we got it from this and thus source. And I'm like, I know thus and thus source, and I know that source is going like this.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's really hard to measure. If I were to to answer your question though, which I think is a good one and an interesting one, 300 is kind of the number. There's this huge discussion too about whether there's a market out there for people who would buy services if they were delivered in a way that they could consume them, a so-called latent market, which arguably adds another 150 on there, billion, not dollars. But it's an I nerd out about this stuff, but it's a fascinating question.
Well, and also whenever you think about the size of the market, Clayton Christensen, who's from Harvard, researcher into disruption, talks a lot about how the non-consumer is really where a lot of disruption happens. So people
Right.
who would normally, and you sort of have seen this in, people who never would have had a will before,
Yep.
and then they go on and they do that. So non-consumption is something to definitely be looking at, because that's often where the fastest adoption can happen. in
Yeah,
disruption.
there's some interesting stats that I've seen, and maybe they come from the same sources that Dan was quoting, but 1 in 2 people in America need a lawyer, but only 1 in 7 end up seeking legal. And so then, you have things like Shake Law that comes along that's B2C, and they're solving a need. So, is that taking from the 1 in 7 that are seeking lawyers, or is it changing that statistic? So that's something that's super interesting, and maybe down the road with Evolve Law, we'll look at doing some research, not me, but get somebody to do some research, because it is really interesting, and I think it's important to give to investors. So that leads into my next question, starting at this end all the way down, with one is, how can legal tech companies best position themselves for funding? Like, what impresses you the most if you're building a legal tech company?
What impresses me the most is authenticity, and I think that's authenticity in the founder solving a problem they're really passionate about, and having that vision. They're thinking 5 steps ahead. This is going to be the product that wins the market. This is the strategy that's going to win the market in terms of my go-to-market strategy. And aside from authenticity, a learning mentality, I think it's critical. Having that EQ and IQ to combine and say, I went to the market with this, I took the feedback, and now this is how I should continue building the product. And so when it comes to legal tech, just to tie that back up, I think if the founder is doing something they're passionate about, it's a large industry, they're solving a large pain point, and they have a really defensible moat around it. They can be scalable, be defensible. I think all those things need to be tied together. Again, building a startup is extremely difficult, and so if all those things tied together in terms of the passion of the entrepreneur, the problem they're solving, and the product that actually solves that problem, that's when I personally get excited.
I think one of the biggest challenges with legal tech is the path to success, because you may be at the nexus point of like, what are major pain points and what are major problems, and you may solve it, but if you can't actually get adoption and people to buy your product because of whatever, that's why I see it is different than in legal tech versus some other, like ed tech is the same thing. You can make a product that middle school kids absolutely love, but if it's at a price point that but if you have to sell it through the district and that's a price point that they don't like, and it has all these other things, and you can't actually make money on it, then it's a problem. So I think having that site, like, okay, this is our problem, and obviously you have to be passionate about it, because running a startup is exhausting. And you're gonna lose all your friends, and you're not gonna have any money and whatever. And so you're gonna do all this stuff, and it's a real grind. You have to do it for something that you're really passionate about. So then you have this problem that you solve, and you have a way to get it. And it cannot be that, oh, this is so awesome, everyone's gonna buy it, because that's what they all say, and nobody buys it. People will buy an easier to understand or they'll take an easier way rather than your totally awesome product. If you don't have the path to market, you have to figure that out. And in legal tech, that market can be super tricky.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I think those folks are exactly right. I would say in conversations with our founders, specifically figuring out how they tackled these problems, they were very open and honest with each other about asking each other the hard questions and really getting their story together, so that when they went to ask somebody for money for their idea, they answered as many of the hard questions as possible, so that they were able to kind of tell a cogent and compelling story.
And so you've answered a little bit of my next question, Dan, which was like, what was the biggest barriers you might want to add, the biggest barrier to raising this VC money in Avo? Like, what were the dragons that had to be slayed to get it done?
Certainly, I think early on and continuing today, and this is an interesting one, like, it's not a very sexy market, right? It's not the puppy sitting popsicle stand or the food delivery. Legal is just not a lot of, and this I think is an interesting point. A lot of investors the only lawyers that they know are corporate lawyers. Whereas those of us who are building products for solo and small firm lawyers know that those are the majority of, from a quantitative perspective, solo and small firm lawyers are the majority of lawyers in the country. But so like a lot of investors don't have experience with those kinds of lawyers. They only know corporate lawyers. So getting them over their initial reaction about legal and then helping them understand the actual dynamics of the market were, I think, really crucial. I had one other note. Yeah, I mean, I think sorry, Mary, the question, just so I make sure I'm responsive to it, was, biggest
barriers.
barriers. Yeah, I think certainly the big one was just like, what's this legal thing, and really, do we want to wade in here, and what does that mean, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think some of the work that LegalZoom did, although they've raised more money, it's private equity money, some of the work they did, particularly around going around the country and defeating the whole unauthorized practice of law, has been great. Paved the way for a lot of companies in this room, mine included. Although we do nothing legal, there was always that concern, and we got that question a lot when we were raising our angel raise.
Yeah.
Was like, what are you doing? You're.
It's a super, like, it happens in more industries than you would think. Is if you're pitching, you're often pitching to investors who are not your target user, and you have to educate them. And so how hard is it? And that's why everyone always says, like, we're the Uber for blah blah, because they just want to have a simple shorthand. So you have to really think about, keeping it simple to explain it, and then if you're doing well, cash money, if you're making money from your customers, if you have traction, that sort of, propels you forward a bit more. But it happens in so many industries that the investor they're not the user. They don't experience the pain. They don't know. But damn it, they want to order their groceries and their pizza at midnight, so they totally get that pain point.
But I think it's something interesting that Dan said, and maybe somebody would like to elaborate, the idea that we face the opposite problem, that if there was a lawyer in the room, they were crying, unauthorized practice of law with this automation. So I think that, we've heard this around in the legal tech world, that the lawyers can sometimes kill the deal. Do any of you have experience with that, where a lawyer's going to put up their hand, and say, Avo's not a good investment, or?
So what I said, and I actually was just having this conversation earlier, that happens again in lots of industries where somebody will talk to their friend who's a lawyer, or I had this issue in a medical device, and they talk to one person, and the one person thinks it's a bad idea for whatever reason. So you have to basically be on top of that. You have to have the information saying, we've talked to thousands of lawyers, and they say they love this. Or we've talked to thousands of small businesses. They would love to have this, and have the real proof, not abstract market. Like, what I like to see is that startups have put themselves at the center of the discussion, not abstract data research that, like, X number of people need a lawyer, but it's like, literally, we were at this conference, we polled 85 people, and this is what they said. Like, really showing that you're inserting yourself into that pain point. Because somebody's always going to talk to a guy, and guy's going to say, like, that idea is stupid. I mean, it's easy to find one person that says something's dumb. It's hard faced with, like, a lot of data. And if that, as an investor, if I was that person, I thought, this is a bad idea, I'm going to delve into it. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to make sure that I get more comfort than just talking to my one friend who's a lawyer.
I would personally take my own experience from education technology, in that having worked in certain industries, sometimes you end up being its own worst critic. So sometimes investors, like anyone, have that muscle memory, and it comes back to haunt you. And so I think it's a balance. If you're an investor, as an entrepreneur, tying back the previous question and this one, you have to know who you're talking to. So you're talking to an angel where, it's very early stage in the company. The conversation is different than when you're talking and you're raising a round from someone like a TCV. And so when it comes to, similarly to who that investor is. If that investor has some industry expertise in the industry that you're building the product in, you betcha they're gonna have even more probing questions. And so as an entrepreneur, you have to prove that you're better equipped to handle that industry when you're faced with tougher questions. So I think at the end of the day, it's a segmenting question of, as an entrepreneur, am I well informed of who am I talking to? And if I'm talking to a person with this background, like what can I expect? And solving those questions that investor may have in his or her mind.
So I want to speak at this just super quickly from a lawyer's perspective and to the lawyers in the room. Because, and I'm going to exaggerate here, but like, short of an Uber for murder, like, there's always going to be legal risks that are going to have to be overcome in any disruptive technology. eBay seems so like, or Amazon, right? They just like 3 years ago finally solved their state sales tax issues. 15 years later, right? Or however long they've been around. And if a lawyer had raised their hand back in '99 and said, "Oh, Mr. Bezos, have you solved this sales tax issue?" and stopped them, right? And we see this increasingly as more regulated industries get disrupted. Again, like we see with the taxi cab industry, there's lots of lawyers who could have raised their hand at the beginning and said, "This could be really bad," right?
That's their job, right?
Yeah, I agree, but I think that's why I say I'm
And it's
speaking
their
to the
nature,
lawyers
yeah.
and from the lawyer and from the lawyer's perspective. If you're a lawyer and you want to wade into this, you're going to have to get comfortable with legal risk, and you're going to have to understand. That's why, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but short of like building something that blatantly violates the law and its sole intent is to do so, there's so much room to push and to kind of jiggle and to move. But the lawyer personality, as you say, is to be really risk averse. And so I think there are a lot of lawyers out there, and I'm not a founder, so like I don't know if I have the stomach for this risk, who think that the lawyer personality translates well into this space, and it might. But and that was one of the comments that our general counsel made, and he's been with the company for years, was letting go of that risk averse personality and that tendency to want to chase down and alleviate every risk and every issue is key if you want to be able to actually kind of do this in the legal tech space.
Okay, so we're just going to go down the table now, and if each person could briefly give their biggest mistake they've ever seen in fundraising and one tip, and then we'll have questions. One tip for fundraising or for legal entrepreneurs, and then maybe leading in with a big mistake. If you don't have a big mistake, it's okay.
Yeah, I'll reframe that, and instead of biggest mistake, I would think about entrepreneurs who crush it at fundraising, because I think it's better to focus on the positive. And I think the entrepreneurs who crush it at fundraising, I think the job of CEO oftentimes as an entrepreneur is you're selling, you are hiring, and you're fundraising. And so when you're very methodical about who you're talking to and understanding where your company is and how much you actually need to raise and who those investors should be talking to, being able to juggle all those balls at the same time as running your company, I think that's really impressive. And so the right entrepreneurs fundraise in that they just have a lot of self-awareness. And the second part of your question, Mary, was around the biggest advice. Mm-hmm. And I think the advice that I would give is, in this day and market, there's a lot of noise in the market. Also, I would focus on what's meaningful to you and your company and not on what headlines and journalists portray as important. I think it's, this label of quote-unquote unicorns gets used, and I think it's a little overused sometimes. So focus more on your company, on your customers, on the problem you're solving, and let the noise in the market be the noise and not influence your decision-making as much. Have a pulse on it, but don't get carried away with it.
Thank you.
So I'm okay going like negative, like what not to do. So I think it's really telling when you talk about your competitors and to really think about maybe competitors in a very broad space. If you come and say, there's nobody doing what we're doing, I'm like, well, is what you're doing now being done in some other way, then that's your competitor. I mean, unless it's like building houses on Mars, chances are what you're doing is being done. Maybe not well, but it's being done by somebody else. So thinking about competition and your competitors, I think is really telling. Another tip I would say is that, again, you want to put yourself at the center of the problem you're solving so that people associate you with problem solving and not a product that solves the problem. Because think about the conversation. You're talking to somebody about, I had this new thing X that can do Y. And the conversation will be something like, well, give me a call back when it's ready. No, you don't want that. If you hear that conversation, then you've put the product first and not the solution and how you're connected with the person. It'll be, oh, I'm solving this problem, and they'll tell me more, and they will connect with you on that problem, and that's how you can get revenue from them much earlier, as opposed to waiting for your product, your MVP, which is always terrible. And you need to have built up some trust with those folks that you're on it. You're going to solve that problem. And your MVP is terrible. We all know it's terrible. That's okay though, because you're my guy. You're going to solve this problem for me. So you put yourself at the center of the problem, not as the face of some product, because that product is never going to be good. It's never going to be finished. So that would be my tip, because I see that all the time. Because it's also much easier to go and tweak and play around with your product, because it doesn't talk back to you. It doesn't say bad things. It doesn't say that you're going nowhere and whatever. It's just a thing you need to work on. It's so much easier to like write some extra code or tweak this particular offering rather than talking to your customer who's like, I need this done now. I really want this to happen. So don't take the lazy way out. Be part of put yourself at the sort of nexus of where the problem is.
So I don't know as much about this space as these two folks do, but from what little I pay attention to it, I think that was sheer genius. And I'm not just saying that to that's exactly, I can say from my own professional experience, the opportunities that I've found in my life have come not because I came up with something, but because I became that person who was interested in that thing. And then people came to me. And that makes so much sense too when you think about building something, because what you are building, and I definitely know this is true for Avo as I've watched it, what you're building in your A round or even what you pitch to your angels may look very different and for very good reason.
Yep.
And if they're really caught up, or if you're really caught up in the gadget you've produced, you're kind of screwed, or it's certainly going to be problematic. So that's
This is why
Amen.
I get paid the big bucks.
Amen, sister. As far as just responding quickly to your question, Mary, I'll just actually read this because this came straight from our CEO, and I thought it was valuable as far as the biggest mistakes. Lack of preparation, lack of interest, ability, passion to sell the dream, a sense of entitlement, too much focus on dilution rather than growing the pie. As far as the tip, I'd just go back because, again, I also speak from the lawyer perspective. I'd go back to that. Let go of that risk aversion, or let mostly go of that risk aversion, and start thinking about opportunity.
Oh, and I just want to add, can I say one little thing? Yes. So the CEO of Glassbreakers just posted on LinkedIn. I know I tweeted out, a bunch of people did. She basically wrote this really long essay in LinkedIn about her sort of first year of fundraising. And my sort of summary of it was, nothing beats doing the work. And you read that and you're like, she did a shit ton of work. What she did, the prep work for meeting investors and all the stuff that she did was, it was a roadmap. And you sort of can look at it and think, if you can't do that, then maybe this isn't for you. But if you can do it, there's your roadmap.
I'll just quickly give a company a shout out. And I meet with a fair number of legal tech entrepreneurs who are in various stages of growth and of building their thing. And one guy that I've come across who I think just seems totally on top of it, and if you guys cross paths with him, he's based in Toronto now, so maybe the likelihood is low, but if anyone knows Beagle or Kian O'Sullivan,
Was that how you pronounce his name?
Kian, yeah,
Kian.
yeah,
All right.
C-I-A-N, there you go, and you're welcome. I just feel like that's a guy, I've had a few lengthy conversations with him and also seen him speak in a number of different settings. They also went through the Microsoft Accelerator, so they're decently legit. And I just feel like he has thought around the problem and so many different aspects of the problem in so many ways. Like, not only do I get answers from him, but I get explanations of why the answer that he has makes sense. I may not know much, and I'll admit that, like, I'm not putting my money on the line. But for legal tech entrepreneurs who want an example of somebody who I think is doing a really interesting and good job, I'd toss his name out there as somebody to follow. And I don't get paid for that. I have their sticker on my laptop. That's the extent of it.
They have co-founders, and the co-founder is Samantha. Is that right? Yeah. So we're actually doing an event with them at Stanford with Beagle because they're part of the fellows. So we're going to open up from questions, but we're just going to agree that we are going to embargo the words unicorn, traction, and then the word that was not said that is my most pet peeve is the word pivot, but that's what you were describing. So those are that's going to be in our blog. Those are embargoed forever. So we're going to open the panel up for questions, and then we have a semi-surprise that Jules is going to do the first of what are going to be called our Darwin Talks. So that will kick off the networking afterwards. But if people have some questions for the panel, anyone? Okay, just
Yeah. Cian, Cian, O'Sullivan, spelled just like you would expect. And the company is Beagle, and I think their website is beagle.ai.
it is.
He can't come to Boston with that name because it should be pronounced Sharn.
It should be Sean, but anyways.
I thought it was hard enough to get from Cian or Sean
Okay,
to
yeah,
Cian, but
Okay, the gentleman in the, yeah, just stand up. That's our protocol now.
do you guys mind? I'll chime in for a minute.
Go for it.
It all kind of here's a total lawyer answer. It depends. I mean, but it really depends on like kind of what you want to do. Like, do you want to raise money? Are you really passionate about your the thing that you want to change? Like, I think generally, I think there's, and again, this is non-responsive. I think there are so many interesting opportunities throughout legal to do really interesting things. The really hot thing right now is artificial intelligence. Everybody, like, there's they're bringing Watson to legal. eBrevia's got an AI technology. Give a quick shout out to their competitors. Sorry, Ned. Kira, because Noah is a good friend of mine. Beagle uses AI, so that's an active space. It's a great question. I guess I'd turn it back and I'd say, what do you know about legal, and where's a problem that you can solve? I just think there are so many interesting problems. I'm a nerd about this space though, but I think to give examples, I think what Casetext is doing with their they allow annotations for on case law and legislation. Like, I think that's really interesting. I think Adam can tell you all about the kind of open data type issues. I think the opportunity to figure out how we can open up data in the legal sphere and then figure out how to monetize that, and that sounds really sort of Silicon Valley-y, and I don't mean it that way, but I think there are huge opportunities to both democratize the law and make money in opening up that data and making it more publicly accessible and more consumable. I guess the one last thing I'd say too is and I'm speaking from a specific place because from Avo, we think a ton about consumer legal services. So it's hard for me to say where the opportunities are in big law and stuff like that. But I would say, again, if we look at a market of 150 billion, say, for consumer legal services, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems is not even really a technology problem. Technology can help solve it. It's a design problem. The legal services delivery mechanism is so flipping broken And that doesn't require I mean, Avo, we have some really sophisticated technology, but really we're a marketplace. It's pretty simple. And I think there are so many interesting problems that can just be solved by design, particularly on the consumer side, just making legal more accessible and more understandable. So I've totally not really answered your question, but I've thrown out some crazy ideas that kind of circle around it.
I think add like a quick thing. It's interesting. In startups, the legal disruption that's actually happening too is on the fundraising side, where
Yeah, great point.
we're trying to have, because we don't want to pay lawyers, we don't want to get them super involved, so we have these very standardized agreements. But funny thing is everything, you think things are standardized, but they're not quite. So starting with some base templates, so now we had the convertible notes, and now there's SAFE. And the question of the legality of them. I would love to, thinking about disruption, I would love to have I could just send some of these documents, because, and those are the simple ones. There were often partnership agreements and other stuff that are, just other agreements just under the surface of my investing agreements. And I would love to be able to have some vetted, sort of lawyers on Yelp to just take a quick look. It doesn't take much, and they say, this is crap, this is good, look at this. And just automate it. They're vouched for. I don't ever need to use them again, or maybe I do, but just like, boom, really take that gig economy, that extra level, so that it's super, because again, I'm like a non-consumer where I have to use my legal firm that I'm with, and I'm like, oh, is this worth giving it to them? So anyways, I think about that a lot.
Okay, there was another hand in the back. The current ethic rules.
So I nerd out about this. I think it stops lawyers from doing interesting things. I don't think it stops a lot.
I think
I don't-
I'm going to disagree with you. Not a practicing attorney, but I think that lawyers hide behind the unauthorized
Oh,
practice of law and ethics.
Totally agree there.
And is that okay, Jules, or have I gone out?
No.
only had one glass of
Amen.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
They hide behind it. There's actually, you can save money on your malpractice if you use technology. There's a reason why some of these technologies will help your practice, because the routine stuff is the stuff that gets messed up. So I think there's a lot of ethics issues that are valid, but I think really it's used as a reason to avoid change.
Yeah, I want to, and to sort of answer this other question, I was thinking about how I could have better answered this gentleman's question from before. And I think what we're seeing is there are tons of companies that are encroaching on legal from the sides. I am sorry, TurboTax is like 99% practicing law. Like really, really close, really close. And we've seen that in a bunch of other spaces. And to answer your point, and this kind of gets back to what I was saying before, like if you're not building a murder for hire engine, I don't think you should worry about that kind of stuff. I think LegalZoom did sort of kinda, but not really. And I just don't. I think you're exactly right. Like when we talk to lawyers, we absolutely beat the drum of like you have to get out from behind the shield of UPL for unauthorized practice of law for a variety of reasons. And we obviously have some beefs with the advertising rules, so like just to like openly disclaim. But again, I would go back to this point of like, unless you're doing something that is like blatantly illegal or blatantly immoral, I don't think the folks at Uber they absolutely do, but like when they started out, they weren't really concerned about the local taxi regulations, right? And Bezos wasn't concerned about the local tax issues.
And that all tied into with accounting, because I'm more of a finance person, so they just would take reserves, they would just reserve against some of these judgments.
And right, you can insurance hedge against them, right? And I do think maybe from an investor's standpoint, like I've read some reports on the legal industry that indicate that that the regulatory structure creates greater risk than disrupting, again, like thinking about simple marketplaces or things like that. But good entrepreneurs, smart innovators, if you can build consumer traction, if you can build consumer demand,
Momentum.
momentum, thank you. I'm not going to say those issues go away, but it really changes the discussion.
Okay, so we have one more question, and then Jules is going to make her way up here to do her Darwin talk. So the gentleman from Toronto, which is not that far. Sorry. You had a question. Okay, just one, please, so that we can.
A good one, make it good. So as an angel investor, just know that the vast, overwhelming majority of angel investors prefer to invest in companies that are a 3-hour drive from their house. I have, my entire portfolio, I think I only have one company that's actually within a 3-hour drive of my house. So I know that that's very unusual. And yes, we always engage with other, it's a team sport. Angel investing is absolutely a team sport. In the very, very early stages, maybe I'm definitely talking to other investors on behalf of the company because it's rare. I mean, most of my investments, it's not like, oh, I invest and then I'm done. Unless I am that other person that I'm like the 10th investor for my group and I'm just throwing, fuel on the fire. So yes, we absolutely do that. And I also see it as my obligation to network as much as possible. And if a startup wants me to try to, if I know somebody, I'll make any intros I possibly can. I'll even do that for companies I don't invest in because it's just good karma. So most angels local for sure. It's not true of VCs. You can comment on that. And then yes, absolutely networking with as many other investors as I possibly can.
Yeah, I'll speak for General Catalyst. We're a national venture firm. We have offices in the West Coast, Boston, New York, so we have companies across the country.
Okay, well, I wanted to thank our panel. It was very interesting, and welcome, Jules.
Mary, do you want us to get out of the way?
This is front row seat to what Jules is
okay,
going to say.
I'm just making
Whatever
sure.
she's going to say.
So thank you, everyone. Bear with me. This will be like 8 minutes, and then we can network. We wanted to do something kind of special for you guys. Can you hear me? Kind of special for you guys at Evolve Law events. So we are piloting this model of a Darwin talk, which is kind of Darwin was kind of a radical guy in his age, did some radical thinking. And we think that radical thinking and radical discussion helps move industries forward. So we want to make that happen here. Or as Darwin says, it's not the strongest of the species that survives or the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. So we're trying to bring about change by some radical discussion. Although they kind of stole my thunder a little bit on the panel, my 5-minute radical discussion is on why isn't there more investment in legal tech, or AKA lawyers hate legal tech. Okay, so quick background on me, very short, is that I spent a long time at Ernst & Young in their venture capital group analyzing venture deals. So I'm not a lawyer, but I spent 3.5 years looking at investments and finding trends and doing diligence for VCs. I thought it would be a good idea to benchmark legal tech against an industry that's kind of similar to legal tech, and they talked about it a little bit on the panel, so fintech. We've got our Monopoly man for fintech, and we've got the guy from Breaking Bad for legal tech. All right, so fintech market size. Typical fintech market size, what you hear, is $2.2 trillion. So that's this little graph here. And it's broken up in a couple of ways. I actually wanted to carve out some of the stuff that I don't think is relevant to legal tech, so I would call that like financial instruments, so things like lending, payments, and insurance. So if we carve that stuff out, we get a market size for fintech services, we'll call it, at $379 billion. Investment in fintech has been fairly booming. Fintech services have been about $3 billion of investment from VCs and seed and VC investment since 2010. 11 billion total, including the financial instruments that we carved out. Legal tech, I know we talked about the market size being difficult to measure, and it's because not many people have dove into the numbers. There are some numbers out there, 300 billion, 400 billion. I put the 400 billion out here because it was the one that was kind of carved out in a blog post by someone we probably all know. But it's about 400 billion. It's debatable, but it just really hasn't been carved out. But let's just say it's about the same size as that fintech services market we carved out. Investment in legal tech has been relatively puny. And I put this chart on the same scale as the fintech chart just so you can see how puny it actually is. And a lot of it has been driven by bigger investments in places like Clio and Avo. The couple of things I wanted to point out are, so 4 times more investment in fintech in the last 5.5 years than legal tech. But the interesting thing is fintech has been ramping up. So this fintech services, 1.1 billion of the 3 billion in the last 5 years has been done in the past 4 quarters. With legal tech, only 17 million has been in the past 4 quarters of the 731 million. So it's actually going down and it's very erratic. So why is this happening? What is going on here? And I wanted to propose and dive into the topic a little bit more of lawyers hate legal tech. This is a little facetious, but it's something we should talk about. Lawyers are natural skeptics. They say no, you, if you're a lawyer, say no for a living, and risk aversion serves clients very, very well. Lawyers are ranking in the 90th percentile when they do these surveys that they do in skepticism, which is the highest of any profession. And that leads, again, really well for client service, but not so well for things like being an early adopter of technology or trying new processes and things. And I like to joke that lawyers are like penguins when they're adopting technology. They wait for the first penguin to jump in the water and not get eaten by a shark, and then all the other penguins jump in. But it's very hard to get the first penguin to jump in the water. And how does that lead to investment in legal tech? So lawyers are tanking legal tech deals. And this is something you talked about a little bit on the panel, so again, stealing the thunder, but when investors are looking at legal tech deals, they will speak to lawyers, which as they should. They're tested, they're talking to the market. Lawyers will say, we're fine how we are, we don't need tech, everything's great. So investors are having valid concerns about lawyers purchasing legal tech and about lawyers giving them feedback that they wouldn't use that specific product. This is a common theme among, as co-founder of Evolve Law, we've got more than 30 companies in the legal tech space, and we talk to them every day. This is a common theme among the companies that we talk to. This has happened in many, many deals, including some of my own. So as co-founder of Hire and Esquire, we're just about to close another round, about $2.5 million. And in 5 instances, lawyers have been part of tanking or close to tanking our deals. And what happens, as I think Mary was saying earlier, is someone will call, so we have a partner that's really passionate about what we're doing, likes what we're doing, and then we'll take it to the investment committee or the partnership, and someone will call their brother or their friend or their venture attorney who will say, no, I would never use them. And especially for my company, Hire and Esquire, this is like, because we're an on-demand economy play, this is like someone asking a taxi driver in 2009 if they would use Uber. Of course they're gonna say no, but that doesn't mean it's a bad investment. So what can you do about it? If you are a lawyer, be an early adopter, try new technologies, get over your skepticism, and actually just start testing things out. And a lot of you in this room are probably already doing that, so preaching to the choir here. Collaborate with innovative tech companies, and especially tell people when you're using a product you love. We have some problems sometimes where we have clients who are using our product, but we have clauses in our contract where we can't tell anyone about it because it's a secret. And then especially if you are asked by an investor to give your feedback on a product, make sure that you're an end user. If you're a venture attorney and you're being asked about a litigation product or a recruiting product, don't say authoritatively that this is something you would use or not. Introduce that investor to your head of recruiting or your litigation partner who is actually going to be the end user. If you are an investor, find the right lawyer to ask. So not only find the right end user, but also find attorneys who have a track record of actually trying new things and using new products and being early adopters. And lastly, give entrepreneurs the chance to respond to any feedback that you get from attorneys. This will help you judge the entrepreneur of how you're overcoming the skepticism and how they approach the market. It'll give you some good insight. Or as our Charles Darwin quote would come in and say, don't follow blindly the lead of other men, think for yourself, and take what lawyers say with a slight grain of salt. And then finally, if you are an entrepreneur, what can you do? You can, one, be aware that this is going to happen and expect negative feedback from attorneys and get in front of it. And you can do this in a couple of ways. Have client references, or if you don't have clients yet, have lawyer references who believe in you and believe in what you're doing. Have those ready to go and have that be part of your diligence pack. If you have an investor that's doing diligence, tell them that the lawyers are probably going to say it's not a good idea. Just put it out there at the beginning and ask for the opportunity to engage with the lawyer directly. My new favorite thing to do is actually say, set up a sales call. I want to sell to that attorney, and you can listen. And that shows your sales prowess, your ability to actually talk about the market and frame the conversation. And at the very least, if the investor doesn't invest, you have an excellent sales contact. And personally, I think that's way better than venture money. And then finally, just don't give up. It might be a little bit harder to be a legal tech entrepreneur, but at the same time, it's worth it. And again, I'll end with a Darwin quote is, men don't differ much in intellect, only in zeal and hard work. So be zealous, work hard. We can change this industry, and we can make lawyers hate legal tech a little bit less. So thank you.